welcome back to the next lesson on board succession, recruitment, and orientation. So we're going to do a deep dive into board specifics on board recruitment. So I've already mentioned that it would be a good idea if we kind of changed up this whole idea of nominating committee. Talk about nominating committee, we often call it a recruitment committee, but I really would like it if we thought about this as a standing committee that had 4 tasks through the year. So what would those 4 tasks be? Calling this a board development committee. You can pick a better name than that. I'm not sure that that's a really good name either. But think about 4 tasks. So the first one is identifying, screening, recommending new directors to the board, ensuring board rotation is orderly, and that we have oncoming and offgoing board members in kind of equal measure, and that we are never kind of behind the 8 ball. So this is an annualized activity, but it's one of the 4 things that this committee would look at. The second thing the committee could do was ensuring comprehensive orientation to new directors. So it makes sense that we do our recruitment, our nomination, our election, and then orientation. So if we have a committee that creates a process that says this is how we do things, then it's really helpful because new oncoming board members feel less overwhelmed. They feel like they are up to speed more quickly. They know some of the acronyms that we talk in. They feel like they have, I love the board buddy idea. So orientation and onboarding of new board members is a really important thing that the committee could do maybe in the quarter, the 3 months following the annual general meeting. The next thing that this committee could do is planning and holding board development activities twice a year, 3 times a year, whatever works. I mean, if you're following the Great Boards video series, then you're probably doing these fairly regularly at board meetings, but there's lots of other board development things, like you can bring in your insurance specialists and have them do an in-service. You could do an in-service on knowing how to read your financial statements. You could have various funders or donors or grant professionals come in and share with you information about the kinds of things that the board should know about how funding works for your organization. And then finally, the 4th thing is to plan annual strategic planning retreats. And actually, if we do it right, this committee could also be planning the annual general meeting, or at least the board component of it that relates to board governance. Annual general meetings are often, the organizing and the planning of them are often defaulted to the executive director and to the senior administrative staff. And some of that's okay. If we're talking about booking facilities and, making sure we've got our refreshments planned and making sure that somebody has booked the caterer and, all those sorts of things, that's fine. That's well left to staff. But the actual business portion of the meeting should be board organized. And it's very rarely so. So the board is often told where to stand, told what they're supposed to do, given the notes to speak, those kinds of things. And there's a little bit too much of that, I think. If you have a fully engaged board, your chair should be ready to speak and open the meeting and should be able to manage the actual election of the board members and officers of the board, if that's the way you do it. So I think it's probably okay for this committee to take on those 2 things, the planning retreat, updating of your strategic plan, and then also the planning of the board component of your annual general meeting. Committee should be comprised of 3 or 4 board members, and the executive director should be ex officio. That means that she is entitled or he is entitled to attend all of the nominating or the committee meetings, but that they don't have a vote on that. I like transparency in board recruitment. It's important that the executive director understand that the board is doing its job in this area, and if it ends up not doing the job, if the committee fails for some reason, disengages, is not meeting regularly, if the executive director is ex officio, she'll put a flag up the pole for the chair and say we need to get some new members on here. And worst comes to worst, what often happens is the executive director ends up managing the recruitment process, which is not good. It weakens the board, but it's sometimes a necessary thing that happens if boards don't kind of fulfill their governance responsibilities with respect to recruitment. The committee needs a written terms of reference, and with the handout in this particular lesson and module, you'll see that you have a sample template for terms of reference. Again, as with all templates, adjust it to work for your organization. It is a generic committee template. It is not just for board development or a nominating committee, so it can be used broadly across your organization. It can also be used for any of your operational committees as well. It's just a really good kind of handy-dandy blank document. We want to consciously recruit board members who will meet the strategic direction of the organization. organization and have skills to bring to the table and a level of commitment and time to bring to the table that will engage them in the achieving of the strategic goals. And in order to do that, we're going to use a particular tool. It's called a board skills audit. Sometimes it's called a board composition analysis, but in any of its iterations or titles, it does the same thing. It looks at who we have, and then it looks for the gaps between people that we have, their skills, talents, and time, and it looks to fill the gaps between that and what we actually need to be able to accomplish the board's work. So I want to walk you through the 12 steps in the recruitment process. So first, that we've already talked about is the Board Succession Development Committee is struck by the board and terms of reference are created. The next one is that if there's not already governance policies and a written and systematic process for recruitment of new members, this committee will create those policies and propose them or recommend them to the board, and the board can approve them by a board motion. So fill that gap with this committee's work as one of your first tasks if there is no recruitment policies already part of your governance policies. So the third step is develop an action plan. An action plan is just kind of funny words, jargony words for who will do what by when. And what we really want to do is that committee to create a step-by-step plan for the next year of recruitment activities. So the time leading up to the annual meeting is usually a busier time. What we should be doing is creating a year-round plan that allows us to be always on the lookout for good potential new board members to bring on to our board. Fourth step then is to identify all of the returning members of the board. So these include people who have been elected for a 2-year term and have another year to serve. And we're also looking for the people who are intending to return to serve another term, so letting their name stand for re-election. And we're then finding out who is finding the board too much work, perhaps intends to resign at the end of their year, or potentially boards members who have termed out, so they've served their 3 2-year terms, they've done their 6 years, and they will be rotating off the board onto a committee if so desired, but there will be leaving a gap, leaving a vacancy in the board. So this allows the committee to figure out how many new board members do we need. You also are going to take a look at the number of people that in your bylaws or your governance policies are the maximum and the minimum number of board members that you can have. Now, the next thing you want to do is to consider your organization's strategic plan and to think about the committees that it has, to think about the work that needs to get done. Where do we need board members to serve? Do we need committee chairs who are board members? Do we just need participants who are board members? And then once we kind of have an idea for what are the jobs that need to get done by the board, we need to do the board skills analysis or composition analysis, and I have a template for you in just another slide or two. Now, communicate then with all of your current board members, with your senior staff members, with your previous board members, with your membership if you have one, that we are on the hunt for board members, and give a description of who you're looking for. We're looking for someone that has a strong finance background to be treasurer-elect of the board. We're looking for someone to fill the executive position of vice chair who will in fact be chair-elect. So any of those kinds of roles. We're looking for directors or members at large of our board. We're looking for someone that will chair our fundraising committee. Well, maybe don't tell them that. Just spring that on them later. We're looking for people who will play various roles on the board. So make sure you get descriptive to your membership, to your insiders, about who you're looking for to serve on the board. Now, your board composition should reflect a couple of things in addition to this. One of the things that should reflect is your community. So if you are in a multicultural urban community that's a fairly large urban center, you want to look to who your community is. That could be based on where your facilities are located, and you want your board to be reflective of that. So diversity and balance on your board in that way is very important. The second thing is your board should have some reflection of the people that you serve. So if you serve people who are, for example, deaf and blind, then you want someone who's deaf-blind or deaf or blind or both on your board. This is a really important point of education for other board members who are hearing and sighted, and it's an absolutely critical thing that your board have representation from your customer, your user group, your participant group on the board. I shared with you that I was a board member of a national organization with 25 women on the board. That board was also not representative of our community. The organization was located in a large urban center in a downtown inner city, almost inner city, off the downtown area. We served a population of women, families, and men who were low income, who had multiple life challenges from psychiatric illnesses, living in poverty, marginal employment, etc. And those individuals were not on our board. They just weren't there. Our board was comprised of primarily upper middle class, middle-aged white women. Not at all a bad thing in terms of those people being wonderful contributors and volunteers, but they were absolutely not able to identify or understand many of the people who we were serving. So that led to a disconnect, and it led to some real frustration for our senior staff that the board was not understanding the nature of the people we served and therefore didn't quite get the services and programs that we offered. So I want you to think outside the box in terms of some of the demographics and some of the people we're looking to serve on the board, and make sure that diversity and board balance is part of that practice. One of the things you want to do is prepare for all your people who might be going out and helping with recruitment, which should be a very broad group, an elevator speech. And so that every single candidate is approached in a similar way. And I would script it. I would make it, you know, a 30-second or a 1-minute, literally, an elevator speech to say, what is our organization, who does it serve, what are our programs, what are we looking for in board members, what is the time commitment. That can be done in a fairly compressed fashion, and make sure that the board members who and anybody else who is going out and recruiting on your behalf knows exactly what they need to say to kind of get off on the right foot with a potential new board member who you might want to attract. 1 or 2 committee members should interview your candidates. It's an informal interview. It's come on over, we'll have coffee, or I'll meet you at the Starbucks and we'll chat for a few minutes. I want to share this. And with that can come a small package of information about the organization. Don't give them your full board orientation package. Give them a half dozen pages, a brochure, a little bit of information that allows them to become better educated about your organization so that they can make a good decision about whether this is a good fit for them. Make sure in that interview you talk about the time commitment, if there's a financial implication, if there's an expectation that every board member donate a certain amount of time or money. And money is often, time is often donated in lieu of money. You can fundraise and donate the equivalent in what you're expected to donate in terms of cash. Any of those things that are expectations of your organization, you should be building into that conversation. Again, meeting time, how long you meet, are you expected to serve on a committee, those kinds of things are part of that. You do not want a board member who says yes and then discovers that there's a whole bunch of expectations that they didn't understand, and then you lose them, or by attrition they just stop coming, or they don't have the time to commit, so they show up for the meetings but they don't participate in any way and they're not prepared. During the interview then, we want to make sure that we are as honest as we can be, and if you have organizational challenges, if you're facing a financial situation, if you have conflict on your board, if you have an executive director who has had a poor performance appraisal, you need to, in tactful ways, say, our board is experiencing some challenges, our organization is struggling, we believe that we're getting back on track, that we're having good successes with having identified the problems, moving the organization forward, and we really need you to understand that we want you to be a contributor to that kind of future-focused, forward-looking kind of thing. It's not a crisis. We're managing it well. Whatever is the truth, make sure that you tell it. I don't want to ever see a board member on a board saying, I didn't know that the executive director had been dismissed and we are facing a lawsuit and I am now potentially liable for decisions that were made before I even came on the board. I don't want that. It's just not fair to the board members. If you have an issue, make sure that you take that time to be clear that we have a situation that we are needing to manage. You can be very careful in terms of how much information you share. Don't share a whole bunch of specifics that will, be breach of confidentiality confidentiality, so be cautious with that. By the same token, you have to share enough so that you're not leading a board member to believe everything is rosy when in fact you're about to lose $100,000 worth of your funding. So make sure that you're honest with your board and that you're forthright and forthcoming with that. Transparency starts in the recruitment process. There's no point having new board members come on and spring it on them after they have made the commitment to be on the board. They'll probably jump ship sooner rather than later. 11th point on our list, second last one in this lesson, is that we invite candidates to attend at least one board meeting. Make sure you get them to sign a statement of confidentiality. And if there's a highly confidential part of your board meeting, do that at the front end, then invite your board member prospect to come to the second half of the meeting so they're not privy to any highly confidential conversations. But even if there's not anything super confidential, you want them to make sure that they actually sign the statement of confidentiality even they're not fully on the board. Follow up with your board members to confirm that they are going to be nominated to the board and confirm their interest in being on the board. We've certainly had board members who had concerns about some of the questions that get asked in board meetings, some of the language they might be using, some of the sometimes judgmental kinds of observations they might make. That's going to be then a difficult moment in time for the committee. They're going to have to go back to that prospective board member and say to them, this is probably not a good fit for you, and the board or the committee, whichever one has made the decision, has selected a number of other candidates, or has selected one other candidate to be nominated to the board. You probably know this from watching all of the videos, but I don't believe in being less than candid. I don't believe in sugarcoating things. If a board member prospect then says to you, well, why wasn't I chosen? And you say, you know what? Some of the language you used implied some judgment of the people that we served, and some of the questions you were asking kind of implied that you didn't have the time. Some of the things that you said kind of implied that you didn't quite understand what a policy governance board does. So those are the kinds of things that you can give some feedback on. Be professional, be polite, be respectful, don't be aggressive, don't be overly critical, make it short. But be clear that this is an organization that wants quality. Don't settle. 2 feet and a heartbeat is not what we're looking for in our contemporary boards. Boards do real work, and they're part of the foundation of an organization. So be picky to a certain degree and be honest and candid when you don't choose someone, and give them a little bit of kind feedback so that they understand why they weren't selected. 99% of the time, we're going to take everybody who walks through the door because they're awesome and because they come to the board with the right intention, with the right ideas, with the right energy and enthusiasm and time for the work that we do. That brings us to the end of this lesson. Please jump in and continue on with the next lesson.